Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world today, and welcome to AdAge's custom webcast, sponsored by accessiBe. The topic of today's webcast is everything web agencies need to know about ADA-compliant websites. Now, what we're going to cover today is how agencies won't get caught unprepared when it comes to web accessibility. And that's going to include such things as what your clients expect from you as an agency when it comes to website accessibility, also how to protect your clients and your agency's reputation from ADA-related lawsuits, and how to enable your clients to reach the most loyal customers, their most loyal customers, regardless of their abilities or disabilities. I'm Christopher Hosford with the AdAge team, and I'm your moderator today. We just have a few quick items to go over before we begin. We'll hear from today's presenters, and then we'll open the floor to your questions. So to participate in the Q&A portion of the webcast, all you have to do is type your question into the Ask a Question text area, and then click the send button. You can submit your questions at any time during the webcast to individual members of the panel or to the panel as a whole, and we'll address as many questions as time permits after our presenters' prepared remarks. Now let's get started. I'd like to introduce our presenters for today. Eli Freedman is Head of Partner Success at accessiBe. We also have Adam Weiss, who's President of Great Matter, a web development agency. We have Kelley Simoneaux, owner of the Spinal Cord Injury Law Firm and founder of Wheel to Ride. We also have Josh Brazil, a C4-5 quadriplegic, a power wheelchair user, disability rights advocate, and a lawyer. And lastly, we have Michael Hinkson, Chief of Vision at accessiBe. Eli, I believe you're up first, so take it away. And
thank you very much, Chris.
And I see that Eli is going to discuss what we can hear from our partners and their clients when it comes to accessibility and ADA compliance. Take it away, Eli.
Thank you very much, Chris, for the introduction and the floor. Thanks very much to everyone joining us today, and of course the AdAge group for hosting this wonderful event. It's really a great honor. So without further ado, let's start off with who accessiBe is, if you don't mind me starting. We're the leading AI web accessibility solution company that makes any website accessible within 48 hours with one line of JavaScript code. And we currently serve over 150,000 clients, 5,000 agency partners, and those numbers are growing every month. So let's start off with what web accessibility is for those who don't know. The American Disabilities Act of 1990 was a huge step in the battle for equal access. It's required for businesses to make their places of public accommodations accessible for people with disabilities. Now, at that time, it was still at the infancy of the internet, of course, so websites weren't considered places of public accommodation, and therefore it didn't require them to comply with the ADA. So just like brick and mortar stores, they have on-ramps for wheelchairs, they have larger hallways for access for wheelchairs. You'll also see street signs with color contrast ratios for people with visual impairments. You'll also see that people with disabilities need to interact with the internet just as we do with public spaces and accommodations. So they'll need to interact with different assistive technologies like screen readers or click sticks so that people can use websites regardless of their disability. Now, it's gone on to the, let's say, legal landscape. In late 2018, the DOJ officially affirmed that websites are now considered places of public accommodations and, again, must comply with the ADA. So that gave people with disabilities recourse. When websites aren't accessible, demand letters and lawsuits can now be sent to compel businesses. And I would say compel them to fix that, right? So my colleague was actually giving a talk in Vegas about this topic over a year ago, and there was a business owner who interrupted him actually in the middle of his speech, and he said that he had to pay a $600,000 fine after being approached by a lawyer making complaints about his websites. So this is, you can imagine, was a huge win for the disabled community. However, business owners and, of course, agencies started scrambling, trying to find different alternative and ways to make their customers' websites accessible, not only to mitigate the risks of lawsuits, but also, most importantly, to provide equal access to all. Now, when specifically talking about the agency problem, so at agencies working specifically with accessiBe, because that's where our front is, they come for two main reasons. The obvious reason, they got a demand letter and they need a fix now. So that's understandable, quite simple to understand. And we've helped over 5,000 agency partners out of litigation or have curbed those settlement fees greatly by use of our solution. Clients expect their agencies not only to inform them of the requirements relating to accessibility, but to provide them with a path forward and a solution, just like other digital solutions that they would offer. Business owners rely on agencies to provide expertise that they don't have. So they're running businesses and they're focused on their day-to-day. They expect them to be aware and solve the compliance issues of the day, whether it's GDPR compliance or the ADA, right? So agencies usually want to make websites accessible preemptively, but don't know how. This is really the part, because manual accessibility requires weeks, months, and sometimes even years, depending on how large the site might be, because you can have websites that are within the millions of pages. This takes a long time for expert coders to do the initial work. Each time that there's a change to the website, there too needs to be a change made there as well. This can easily cost tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and millions of dollars. And these are even for websites that cost $500 a year. For SMBs, this is unattainable up until this point, until essentially accessiBe came around. This is where making websites accessible is actually fun and free, and without requiring hours and hours of valuable developer time. In fact, it's all done automatically, so you don't have to worry about ongoing compliance. accessiBe performs a full scan every 24 hours. That's to ensure that you keep up that level of compliance and accessibility at all times. Now, agency owners' biggest concern is usually, now that my clients are coming to me with these demand letters, lawsuits, and want to make their websites accessible, what are they supposed to do? What am I supposed to do if I don't have the means to achieve that level of accessibility, of course? And how do I provide this vital service to my clients' accessibility as a universe that I really know nothing about? So to give some background, in 2017, since 2017, there's been a 300% year-over-year increase in the amount of demand letters and lawsuits that have been served. And in 2020 alone, there were an estimated 265,000 demand letters that were sent out to business owners with ultimatums. The average settlement cost is $35,000 as well. And I have this conversation with agency owners almost daily, and our approach is as follows. Telling your customers why accessibility is vital in the modern business landscape is not only a responsibility as an agency, as we now know, it's an opportunity. And of course, you don't want your clients to be exposed to such significant legal risk, but we know that by making websites accessible, there's a great deal of opportunity again. So let's dive into those really quickly. Number one, it's simply the right thing to do, okay? Let's face it, it's 2021. Everyone should be included. Inclusivity, inclusion, this word is no longer a buzzword. People genuinely appreciate and seek out inclusive organizations, right? The opposite is true as well. Organizations that aren't inclusive can face some serious backlash at times. So by making your website accessible for all, you're giving everyone an equal opportunity to patronize your business. It comes to brand exposure and awareness, I should say, as far as the topic goes. Making your website accessible means that you're now automatically reaching out to 20% of the population that previously was inaccessible to you and your clients. The disabled community is the most brand loyal group for those who do not know, because of how little opportunities are out there, and of course, websites that are accessible to reach those products and services that they offer. In fact, many folks with disabilities, and I'm sure Josh, help me out here, buddy, that will share positive, inclusive websites and businesses with others in those communities through Facebook, WhatsApp groups, and those people will often make an effort to patronize businesses that make an offer to include them as well. So finally, people love companies that are socially responsible and give back to their communities. Personally, that's something that I love doing, is giving to companies that don't only serve their bottom line, but actually give back to their communities. So it's a really great PR opportunity now to come out and say how accessible you are. As far as the user experience perspective, accessibility isn't just for people with disabilities, for those who think so. It actually improves overall user experience. We need to oust this idea that it only pertains essentially to people with disabilities. It's for everyone. Just how most people who use curb cuts today aren't in wheelchairs. They might be pushing a stroller, biking, rollerblading, or any number of things. Web accessibility improves an experience for all users. accessiBe improves and provides numerous features like night mode or integrated online dictionary that makes websites comfortable and navigable for everyone. So bottom line, if you're selling something online or you need to make it easy and as smooth as humanly possible for people with disabilities to buy something from you or whoever else, accessiBe does that exactly for you. You'll also probably want a peace of mind from litigation. One of our valued partners, we'll call Nick, and the last name is redacted here, actually went through quite the ordeal in regards to litigation. One, unfortunately, of many of our partners and our customers, of course. But to make a long story short, one of his customers was sued. The amount of excruciating pain that he and his customer went through, the impact that it had on his brand and his business, how it reflected, of course, on him and his customer's business as well. They had spent thousands and thousands of dollars on end, hours on end, trying to mediate and remediate the issue. And essentially what happened is Nick said straight out, I never want to have to go through that pain again. I also want to include, of course, because it wasn't as prevalent or it wasn't a known issue to him before. So as he didn't do it out of malice, of course, he just didn't know, and that ignorance actually costed him a lot, and of course that of his clients. So right now we currently protect over 100,000 clients, ranging from mom and pop shops all the way to hundreds of global brands like Payless, Mobileye, Seco. We're also serving entities like the Miami State Attorney's Office, Catherine Hernandez, the Florida Bar Association, thousands of law firms. The names go on, of course. We've never had a client successfully sued due to the use of our solution. And in fact, we've helped over 4,500 of our customers out of litigation by way of our litigation support package, which is included in the cost of every license that is purchased from us. And there are absolutely no hidden fees. We can, of course, inquire about that afterwards in case you have any questions or concerns. I would love to elaborate more on that. And to about the opportunity, a lot of people don't consider the sheer amount of opportunity in the market. So the CDC actually reports that 61 million Americans are currently registered as disabled. With an annual spending power of $490 billion, there are actually globally 1.3 billion people in the world today. And with that, $8 trillion in annual spending power. So enabling your clients to capture such a massive and previously untapped potential market is a valuable way beyond just legal compliance, right? Accessibility is an opportunity that we hope to enable all businesses to take advantage of and to view it such not as being a burden, as many now view it, unfortunately, particularly if their only option is manual work. So through automation, and of course, our fantastic team, if we can pat ourselves on the back, from the tech side of our partners like Josh, we aim to make the entire internet accessible by 2025. So I really hope that you join us today in that vision. Thank you all very much for listening. My time is over, and I would love to introduce Adam Weiss, president of Great Matter. I consider him a friend, accessiBe's valued partner, and he will be providing some insight and perspectives on getting a demand letter to becoming an inclusive agency. So take it away, Adam, please.
Awesome. Thank you very, very much, Eli. So we've been developing accessible websites since about 2003 or so, and not every client wanted an accessible website. So it wasn't really a big focus. We ended up being much more reactive than we did proactive. And that's since changed. But really, a lot of agencies like ours are in the same boat. And really what it comes down to is different clients have different needs until now. I think what happened is a lot of folks realized that most of their website viewers were probably people with sight, people who didn't have issues. But when they realized the number of people who did have some kind of problem, whether it was vision focused, audio, they really, I think, needed the opportunity to say, hey, we need to build something that's going to work for everyone. That's going to be people who potentially lost clients if they don't do that. What really then triggered a lot of our clients coming to us and asking to, say, retrofit their website were lawsuits. And one of the big ones, one of our first big ones, was a client who was not yet a client. They had a WordPress website and said that 2 law firms had approached them with demand letters and said, what's it going to take for us to be compliant? And the answer was a lot of money. We went through and we rebuilt the entire website really from the standpoint of how do we make it accessible? It was very complex. It had a lot of JavaScript components to it, and it took a lot of time and money. Fast forward a couple of years, we found accessiBe. And the truth was, if we had found them sooner, we would have saved this client a tremendous amount of money and us a lot of time. We have better things to do with our time than making something accessible. And so when we have a tool like accessiBe, it gives us the ability to essentially drop in a solution that's going to handle virtually all of the issues that a website's going to have from an accessibility standpoint. But again, there's a lot of things to take into consideration. What content management system are you using as an agency? Are you using Squarespace? Are you using Wix? Are you using WordPress? Are you using Drupal, Sitecore? All these different platforms have different levels of accessibility out of the box. And on top of that, even if it is ready to go, even if it's completely accessible, which is unlikely, but even if they say they are, you're still going to want to have a tool that's essentially a plugin to essentially gap fill. You want to make sure that if your client puts in an image that doesn't have an alt tag, that it's covered automatically. You want to make sure that if you have a form that somehow gets put in a hurry, that it gets all the ARIA and all of the labels and everything put in appropriately. And if you're not there all the time, if you're not getting triggered every time something happens, you're going to miss it. And an enterprising attorney might find that and send you a letter. And that's something that we want to avoid. And accessiBe for us is that safety net. The websites we build, they are accessible until they're not. And accessiBe really helps that out. At the end of the day, obviously, there's a lot of other tools that we've looked at that are out there. UserWay, for instance. We implemented that for a client at their insistence because it was, I think it was free. And about 2 months later, we got a phone call. Hey, what was that tool that you recommended to us? We need to put that in instead. This other tool, it didn't work the way we thought it would. And since then, it has worked, accessiBe has worked very, very well on that website and pretty much every website that we put it on. My recommendation to any agency out there is utilize accessiBe because it allows you as a firm, as an agency, to spend your time, your efforts, mainly your development efforts, in places where your strength is. And let accessiBe be the plugin that is a drop-in to make it a lot easier to be compliant so that people, mainly your clients, will get more business. And so that you don't get that phone call that says, hey, our website's not accessible. We've been sued for a ton of money. What do we do? Being proactive is really, really helpful. And to me, the accessiBe tool is by far the best way to do it. And I know that I have not used up much of my time. Eli, I guess I'm going to give some of my time to you just retroactively. But I would like to introduce Kelley Simoneaux, who will talk a little bit more.
Hey, welcome, Kelley. I understand you're going to be talking from a lawyer perspective about demand letters, lawsuits, and also how something like accessiBe can help agencies and their clients. So take it away.
Your microphone's off, Kelley.
Okay, this should help. Hi, everyone. My name's Kelley Simoneaux. I'm a disability rights lawyer located in Washington, D.C. And the reason why I focus in this type of work is from my background and personal experience as a person with a disability. I was in a car wreck when I was 16 and became paralyzed. And it became very clear after becoming a person who had lived their life without a disability and then lived their life as a person with a disability, how many barriers there were in place. So as I went through law school and now practicing law, I like to focus a lot on how we can make our society more accessible. So certainly when the Americans with Disabilities Act was enacted in 1990, as Eli mentioned, it was really looking at a physical space, which as a wheelchair user was incredibly important because that's how I can get into the grocery store, take my child to school, etc. But it really didn't address something that is so fundamental in our lives now, and that's the internet, access to the web. Certainly after living through the time of COVID in 2020, we certainly see how much more important web accessibility is. that has been the lifeline this last 16 plus months for so many people to get groceries, to order their food, to do things without having to physically go into spaces. Now, there's two separate sets of laws that were enacted that look at accessibility for people with disabilities. Arguably, the most robust part is the Rehabilitation Act that came before the ADA, but in 1998, after the ADA, it was expanded in Section 508. Now, the Rehab Act, Section 508, applies to federal governments, to federal contractors, anyone working in that sphere. However, it does set forth in a more robust way what requirements are. So if you're a person who is helping develop anything for the government, for a government contractor, you really need to have your eyes on Section 508. And of course, what it requires is that a person with a disability is not to be discriminated against in accessing a business. And so that also includes that business. The second set of legislation that was pushed through, the Americans with Disability Act, covers everyone else. There's multiple different titles. The one that applies to websites is Title III. As Eli said, it's called Areas of Public Accommodation. So what remains to be determined fully is how a website fits into a place of public accommodation. You can certainly see that a ramp allows a person into a building, but what requirements should a website have in order to allow someone into a business's webpage? Based on where you are or what courts have are looking at the issue, it does differ, but it's an emerging trend and something that every business needs to have their eyes on. There was a fundamental case related to this where a individual who was blind could not access a website to Domino's Pizza. And this case has gone on, and essentially what it has determined is the website was a place of public accommodation and that Domino's must make its website accessible. Now, how do you make your website accessible? There are different ways and standards that are applied, and this is called the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG. Now, when it started at, we're now at 2.1. Essentially, what every website should aim to have and what accessiBe is able to provide to websites is WCAG 2.0 AA. Why is that important? Well, as Eli mentioned, and as has been discussed, is you're a business, you're operating on the internet as every business is now, but you receive a letter and someone says your website or a component of your website is not accessible. What are you supposed to do? What we know in trends is that these types of letters are coming to businesses more and more and more. And what we see is that there is more litigation surrounding this issue. In fact, for 2021, it's projected that there's going to be 4,000 lawsuits related to web accessibility. The places that are seeing the most cases are California, New York, and Florida. You may be thinking, well, my business or my website, it's based in Idaho. But what is unique about web accessibility is that anyone can access your website, and therefore you really a suit could be brought against you really in any jurisdiction. And it makes things incredibly confusing. And then you're thinking about, well, what do I need to do to make it accessible? There's so many questions. And really for people who don't delve into the ins and outs of web accessibility on a daily basis, it's quite frankly overwhelming. And it really subjects you to a lot of potential coverage or missing that coverage where you could receive a demand letter. That is why having an easy solution where you're not having to think about it every day, you're not having to think about the updates, like accessiBe is very important. It goes through, it checks your website, it makes those remediations that are necessary to look at the WCAG standards, and your focus can solely be on how to increase your business not what potential issues you may have in your web accessibility. There's a lot of things to consider when you receive a demand letter. Should I settle it? Should I, push things forward? What do I have to do? The first thing is you need to take it seriously. These types of demands are coming, and it could be coming from not one person, but many people. There's a lot of discussion, and in fact, just a week ago, there was a lawyer who was reprimanded by the court for filing, they call them drive-by lawsuits, where one lawyer or one plaintiff is filing demand after demand after demand, or lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit. And they're really going in, looking at a website, finding, a small issue, and then filing a lawsuit against that company. And we want to avoid that type of risk, which is why not just looking at what one demand specifically says, what they want to have, but completely eliminating accessibility issues overall for your website. And again, that is why accessiBe is providing those features that will allow you to day in and day out have accessibility on your website. So you're not wondering, if I fix this, that's good, but what if someone brings a demand to me based on another issue? It's going to cover everything. And that really gives you the peace of mind to be able to move forward and focus on your business itself. As far as whether to approach the demand and settle or to have it go to court, you want to think about who's going to see this. Now, if it's something that's settled or is something that you can fix, then that stays private. If it's not addressed and it goes to court, that becomes very public, and that affects a business's reputation. Certainly the cost of defending these cases is extremely expensive. And, typically an insurance policy isn't going to cover ADA claims. But the important thing to know is that under the ADA, you're strictly liable for what's on your website. You can't say, well, I'm working on getting it accessible. It doesn't matter. If it's not accessible in that moment, that is something that you can be liable for. Or you can, say, I didn't know. Not knowing what the standards are, not knowing how to fix a problem is not a defense for an inaccessible website. So at the end of the day, what we know in trends is that more cases are going to be filed, more demand letters are going to be sent, and more courts are going to be looking at this and further defining what areas of public accommodation are. So in order to protect yourself preemptively before you receive the letter, before you receive a lawsuit filed against you, is to have that protection in place that knows the standards, knows the guidelines, and accessiBe is something that can easily do that for any website. One last thing is there are multiple different overlay companies that exist now. One thing that's very unique about accessiBe is that it has a much broader reach on disabilities. Speaking about how you make your website more disability friendly, accessiBe is looking not only at people who are blind or have low vision, but also motor disabilities, cognitive disabilities, and people who have seizures. It includes so many different types of disabilities. And so it's important when you're looking at what type of overlay you want the one that's most inclusive as possible. And you'll find with accessiBe that it has so many different coverage points. So thank you all for your time. If you have any questions, feel free to send a message, and I will turn it over to Michael.
I think it's Josh next.
Okay.
I think it is indeed Josh. Hey, Josh, welcome to the panel. Of course, as I had mentioned at the beginning, you're a C4-5 quadriplegic, disability rights advocate and lawyer. Let us know a little bit about what you make of website accessibility from a customer point of view. It was mentioned earlier that it can be beneficial not only to the disabled, but regardless of ability or disability. So go ahead, take it away, please.
Absolutely. So Hi, everyone. My name is Josh Basil, and it's great to be here today. So just a little bit about myself before we dive into the customer experience. So when I was 18 years old, before then I was a college athlete, loved playing tennis, and I was on a family vacation at the beach, and a wave picked me up, threw me over my boogie board, and slammed me on my head. That day changed my life forever. I shattered my neck and became paralyzed below my shoulders. I tell families that I mentor across the country that before my injury, I did things 1 million ways. And after my injury, I now get to do it 1 million new ways, 1 million different ways. So for me, before my injury, when I would access the internet, I would use my fingers to type. I would use my hand to take control of the mouse. Now I type with my voice. Now I move my mouse cursor with my mouth with this special controller. So there's different ways of accessing the internet depending on your unique abilities. Whether you're paralyzed, you have a cognitive disability, whether you're blind or low vision, there's all these incredible tools and resources out there that allow you to kind of have the ability to access a website. But the trouble is thinking of it like this: you can have an entire city with all these different streets, but if the streets themselves are not accessible, it's going to be very difficult with your unique technology to access them. And right now, unfortunately, if you think of the internet as a city, over 98% of the internet is inaccessible. That means only 2% of the internet and websites meet accessibility standards. That's a really, really low number. And I wish in 2021 that wasn't our reality, but it is. I always would love, any new technology or piece of law to always have a disability to have a seat at the table so that it's done right. But unfortunately, too often, the disability community is an afterthought and we have to play catch up. So right now, as time went on, we've been playing catch up because there really wasn't a great scalable solution out there to be able to bring it to the next level. And luckily today with accessiBe, that's changing. So one of the things that I love most about accessiBe as a person that's paralyzed below the shoulders is how their tools and services provide options, a customized approach. So if you took everybody in the paralysis community and said you can only have one wheelchair to use to get around, that would make life really difficult because everybody has their own unique abilities, and little changes here and there make a huge difference. But with accessiBe's tool, you can create a customized profile based on whether you have a motor disability, you have you're blind or low vision, or screen reader. If you have epilepsy, you have a profile that actually can turn off flashing lights, so it doesn't trigger those. If you have a cognitive disability, they have a profile that allows you to be able to read and focus better. And then also they have an ADHD friendly profile, which it's incredible the different options that you have. So even if you have a website that's fully coded and it's done correctly based on coding purposes, you don't get those unique user profiles without having something like accessiBe as a tool to kind of change the game and let it speak to your own unique abilities, which for me is game changing, and others in the disability community as well. So it's one of those things. For me, I get tired throughout the day, and that means that every click really counts. So when you're on a website, being able to access the different menus, headers, forms, or to know if anything is a hyperlink or not, it's not always given. And I use an on-screen keyboard a lot to kind of jump from place to place to place. And it's navigating a website that's inaccessible versus accessible is a different world. For me and for so many others with disabilities, the internet is so important because it's accessing information that can be life-changing. It's accessing products that can benefit our lives. It's accessing services that can change our everyday. And so many of that we're speaking today with agencies represents different businesses that we want to access. We want to We want to tap into everything that they have to offer. But unfortunately, the disability community, because only 2% of the internet is accessible, is probably the least untapped population in the world right now, and especially in the US, of being not utilized and not being reached, not being a valued customer. The feeling of going to an inaccessible website versus an accessible website is one of feeling welcomed. When it's inaccessible, it's like a punch in the gut saying, you know what, you're not welcome to be here. And we're sorry, but we've chosen to not make this website accessible. And that hurts. And being able to have a welcoming website and going there and benefiting from it, persons with disabilities are lifelong mentors and they're part of a community. When something is right and you're done right, we share it with everybody. We're like, we want to thank those people for thinking about us and caring about us and welcoming us into their website home. Statistics have shown, there's been Nielsen studies done that show that the disability community is the most brand loyal population in the country. And it's because when we're treated right, we come back again and again and again as repeat customers, because we would rather go to places where we have good experiences than bad experiences. And it's kind of as simple as that. I love the fact that accessiBe gives you those customized abilities to better access websites. And it's exciting that it's here, and it's exciting that it's a scalable solution that's updated daily across the platform. So often you can have an accessible website and you've done the traditional coding route, but the second you change one thing on that website, if you don't make that one part accessible as well, it's not going to be. But with accessiBe as a tool, it automatically scans and updates it every single time you update your website. So it makes life easier for you. And then it makes life easier for us as your visitors to experience exactly kind of the information that you put out there. So it's, I love being an advocate for the community. Whether when I was first injured, I was on a ventilator and my voice was taken away from me for 5 weeks. And, I was silenced during that time. And ever since I regained my voice back, I wanted to make sure that every word counted and every word had a purpose. So like even today, I want to thank you for listening to what I have to say and for hopefully taking the next steps to recognize that web accessibility matters, not only to your business's bottom line, but for the community at large. And there's so many people that are waiting and wanting that opportunity to benefit from the products, services, and information that your companies provide. So I want to thank you so much for the opportunity for speaking today.
Thank you, Josh. Every person has a story. I think yours is particularly moving. Next, we have Michael Hinkson. Michael, I understand that you're going to be talking about accessiBe's vision as part of making the world accessible. That's a grand vision in itself, making the entire world accessible. So take it away. Tell us what you have to say.
How much time do we have for that? So thank you all for being here. As Chris said, I'm Michael Hinkson. Very briefly, I've been involved in the assistive technology world in one way or another for many years. I worked with Dr. Ray Kurzweil and the National Federation of the Blind to develop the original Kurzweil reading machine for the blind back in the 1970s, and I've been in this field ever since. And one of the blessings I had of working with Dr. Kurzweil, who is now a well-known futurist and inventor, and who has created the concept of the singularity, where computers and people will join together. One of the values I had working with him was getting to see right from the beginning the concepts of artificial intelligence and how they can work with other technologies to enhance what we do. The Kurzweil reading machine truly learned. The more it read on a page, the more accurate it became, and it was dramatic to see how that happened. So forward till now, we have this product called accessiBe, which came about because in Israel in 2017, a law was passed that mandated that websites be accessible. And there were 3 people who had started a company in 2015 specifically to create websites for people. Well, now in 2017, this law was passed, and they're scratching their heads, wondering how are we going to go back to all of our customers and quickly make their websites accessible, because we've got to do it sooner. We can't wait. And we don't have the resources to do that, which is understandable, because every website, when you're working through the standard coding process, every website has to be done individually, inserting what are called alt texts to describe images or to make other things available to blind persons, making websites so that keyboards can truly be used as opposed to just using a mouse. One of my most incredible frustrations with websites is going to a website that says choose from this list for whatever reason, and then you invoke the list, which I can do with the screen reader that I use, this program called JAWS. But as I arrow through it, it's expecting to see a mouse. So every time I mouse down, if I'm using a mouse, the screen refreshes with whatever was that particular item, and I keep going down until I get to the one I want. That doesn't work with a keyboard. I have to be able to go down the list, hear the title of it, and then when I get to the one I want, select it and invoke it. And a lot of websites don't do that. As I think Adam said, as Eli has said, as I think everyone here has said, a basic theme is people aren't leaving access out intentionally. It's mostly because of a lack of awareness. But the problem is that it isn't being done from the outset, and it won't be done from the outset for a long time. The tools that we use to create websites, by the way, today, many of which are automated themselves, the tools don't build in mandated accessibility. Microsoft's website is not fully accessible. I think Kelley mentioned the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG, and they are that. They're guidelines. They are items that, if you meet them, are supposed to make a website accessible. On my website, my favorite example is there's an image, and in the image, when accessiBe gets to it, accessiBe actually is able to describe the image. It says, man in black suit hugging yellow Labrador retriever. That's correct, technically speaking, and it would meet WCAG standards today. But it isn't really correct because it's all about the theme on the website, which is that Michael Hinkson happens to be a survivor of the World Trade Center terrorist attacks on 9/11 because he was on the 78th floor of Tower 1 and escaped with his guide dog Roselle. And the picture shows Mike Hinkson hugging Roselle, which is really what I want the image to say. And so the only way to get that is to code it in, because there isn't a way for artificial intelligence to do that. So what I'm saying is that accessiBe is at least a great enhancement to what manual coding can do. And for a lot of websites, it will pretty much solve accessibility issues. The value with accessiBe and the vision that the accessiBe founders had was to be a scalable solution. So there is, for example, someone who contacted me about a month ago and said, I'm on a website that uses accessiBe and there's something I can't do. Can you investigate it? So we did investigate it and found that there really was a problem in the way accessiBe was interacting with that site. And also, it was potentially something that could affect other websites. Well, accessiBe fixed the problem. When they did, that website became accessible again in the way that it should be. But any other website using accessiBe that had the same problem suddenly automatically got the same fix. A scalable solution, a solution that's inexpensive, a solution that works across websites. It's been mentioned already, but accessiBe's goal is to make the internet fully inclusive and accessible by 2025. The reality is this technology exists today. The scalable technology exists today to make that happen. And we want all of you to be a part of that. We believe that there is great merit in using a product like meet WCAG standards today, but it isn't really correct because it's all about the theme on the website, which is that Michael Hinkson happens to be a survivor of the World Trade Center terrorist attacks on 9/11 because he was on the 78th floor of Tower 1 and escaped with his guide dog, Roselle. And the picture shows Mike Hinkson hugging Roselle, which is really what I want the image to say. And so the only way to get that is to code it in, because there isn't a way for artificial intelligence to do that. So what I'm saying is that accessiBe is at least a great enhancement to what manual coding can do. And for a lot of websites, it will pretty much solve accessibility issues. The value with accessiBe and the vision that the accessiBe founders had was to be a scalable solution. So there is, for example, someone who contacted me about a month ago and said, I'm on a website that uses accessiBe and there's something I can't do. Can you investigate it? So we did investigate it and found that there really was a problem in the way accessiBe was interacting with that site. And also, it was potentially something that could affect other websites. Well, accessiBe fixed the problem. When they did, that website became accessible again in the way that it should be. But any other website using accessiBe that had the same problem suddenly automatically got the same fix. A scalable solution, a solution that's inexpensive, a solution that works across websites. It's been mentioned already, but accessiBe's goal is to make the internet fully inclusive and accessible by 2025. The reality is this technology exists today. The scalable technology exists today to make that happen. And we want all of you to be a part of that. We believe that there is great merit in using a product like You Meet Them are supposed to make a website accessible. On my website, my favorite example is there's an image, and in the image, when accessiBe gets to it, accessiBe actually is able to describe the image. It says, man in black suit hugging yellow Labrador retriever. That's correct, technically speaking, and it would meet WCAG standards today. But it isn't really correct because it's all about the theme on the website, which is that Michael Hinkson happens to be a survivor of the World Trade Center terrorist attacks on 9/11 because he was on the 78th floor of Tower 1 and escaped with his guide dog, Roselle. And the picture shows Mike Hinkson hugging Roselle, which is really what I want the image to say. And so the only way to get that is to code it in, because there isn't a way for artificial intelligence to do that. So what I'm saying is that accessiBe is at least a great enhancement to what manual coding can do. And for a lot of websites, it will pretty much solve accessibility issues. The value with accessiBe and the vision that the accessiBe founders had was to be a scalable solution. So there is, for example, someone who contacted me about a month ago and said, I'm on a website that uses accessiBe and there's something I can't do. Can you investigate it? So we did investigate it and found that there really was a problem in the way accessiBe was interacting with that site. And also, it was potentially something that could affect other websites. Well, accessiBe fixed the problem. When they did, that website became accessible again in the way that it should be. But any other website using accessiBe that had the same problem suddenly automatically got the same fix. A scalable solution, a solution that's inexpensive, a solution that works across websites. It's been mentioned already, but accessiBe's goal is to make the internet fully inclusive and accessible by 2025. The reality is this technology exists today. The scalable technology exists today to make that happen. And we want all of you to be a part of that. We believe that there is great merit in using a product like accessiBe to enhance and help the coding world, as well as get to the many websites that the coding world can't. If I want to start a business on a website like Amazon or Shopify or whatever, there are tools that can help me quickly set up a website. Doesn't cost a bunch of money at all. Problem is no accessibility built into that process. So then how do I make them accessible? Well, I pay another fee, which can be several $100s or more. And even when I get that done, As has already also been pointed out, if I make changes, accessibility may very well break, and I need to get somebody to come back in and address the fixes. accessiBe automatically does that as part of what it does. In addition, accessiBe provides you, the website owner, or you, the agency, or both, the agency that invokes accessiBe, it provides you a monthly report showing you what's working, what's not, and that report will actually be enhanced over time to even recommend other ways to address whatever it finds that accessiBe doesn't, or will tell you what accessiBe is doing to remediate or address any issues that you have. accessiBe has so many customers today because accessiBe works, or let me rephrase that, hashtag accessiBe works. The fact is that the product is a viable product today. People have been using it since 2018, and it's extremely exciting to see how the website landscape is changing for Josh, for all of us, because of what accessiBe does. And there are many websites. We mentioned a few already. One of my favorites, although I haven't ordered anything from them yet because I've been trying to not gain weight, is, well, there are two. Oreo.com, that's right, the Oreo cookie site, or Purdy's Chocolate, Purdy's.com, which has some really good sounding chocolates, but we are trying to not gain too much weight here and trying to lose some, so we have resisted so far, but I do believe in the Borg, so resistance ultimately probably is futile. But the bottom line is that we are changing what it means to have an inclusive internet. accessiBe is making it possible for us to have the internet that we want and the access that we want. The studies in the world from the Census Bureau, Social Security Administration, even somewhat the CDC, say that at least 20% of all persons in the United States and in the world have a disability. Nielsen did a study that was alluded to earlier, I believe by Eli, that talked about brand loyalty. Yeah, we're loyal to brands where we can go on and use their website because most places don't allow that. So I'm going to try to use websites that I know work anytime I need to, where it's at all possible. And so if you use some technology, in our case, accessiBe, to make your website accessible or make your customers' websites accessible, you are in fact opening yourself to getting an additional 20% of business that you never had before. It doesn't get better than that. And the price just isn't overly difficult to absorb to make that happen. So our vision is inclusiveness. We want you to be a part of it. I am glad to help any of you at any time. I'm easy to reach. It's michaelhi@accessiBe.com. And I'm sure that the contact information will be made available. If I can help you and answer questions after this webinar, glad to do it, and glad to help you help us make an inclusive world really happen by 2025.
Final words? How would you like to wrap it up? It's been a very informative webcast so far with a lot of elements.
Yes, it really has. I don't think I can add possibly any more. Thank you so much, Kelley, Josh, Michael, and of course you, Chris. These have been really, truly inspiring personal stories and perspective on the importance of accessibility. I hope that everybody got the value and, of course, what we're trying to portray here today. It's an extremely important topic, and I'm really glad that you again joined us today. So for those who might be wondering about a partner to help with accessibility, we are proudly offering the best partner program, hands down, with no cost and no commitment. And so we provide each partner with a dedicated partnership manager, and that way to ensure that you and your clients are taken care of in a timely fashion. So what's exactly involved in the partner program? First and foremost, you have ACE, which is an amazingly powerful tool which we just came out with in the last year. It's a free solution to essentially generate a web accessibility report to see where your level of compliance currently stands. And you also receive monthly reports on your websites once you opt into our solution as well. So just go to ace.accessibe.com. Again, that's ace.accessibe.com. accessiBe.com, and with just a few clicks, you can essentially check your level of accessibility. What you also receive is our accessibility solution free for your own agency website. Again, there's no cost, there's no quota. This is yours to have. We would like for you to become accessible, to showcase this to your customers so that they can test it out and ensure that you also have a revenue stream to accommodate, of course, to your business as well. We're offering a 20% commission for each one of your clients that, of course, you bring. And not to mention, we provide co-marketing events, materials, marketing materials, a number of different free services, of course, to help you and all aspects of accessibility, if you will, both behind and in public.